Hey creative, it's your girl Brianne, and I'll be showing you my process on how to paint trees. Okay, so you know we have to start off with my favorite Mega 5 palette. I'm using a large flat brush and sketching in our composition using diluted paint, which here I'm using a thin wash of black. This quick underdrawing will act as our roadmap, making sure we don't lose placement once we start layering. Here I'm color blocking in the sky with blue and white, keeping your brush strokes horizontal and smooth. Now for the mountains, mix blue, red, and yellow with a shade of black to create natural rock tones. I define the top of the mountains with the edge of my brush to give a nice contrast against the sky. With perspective 3, I'm color blocking in an earthy green and defining the edge of the hill with a darker shade of green to differentiate the mountains being tucked behind that hill. And next I'm color blocking in the 4th perspective with a darker shade of green. This is where most of the trees will stand. And here I'm blending in a light blue for the atmospheric perspective, basically creating a light mist across the horizon. Lastly, for the foreground, which is the 5th and final perspective, I'm blending in a bright green using more yellow, less blue. So now that we have our 5 layers mapped out, let's go in with a small flattened filbert brush to start forming our shapes. I've jumped back to the sky, applying the formation of clouds using pure white and a tad of black for the underbellies. Let that layer dry a bit before adding more detail to bring the clouds to life. Next, let's revisit the mountains. I'm adding shadows by painting creases in the rocks, then complementing them with a contrasting light brown for where the light is gently shining towards the left. Here I'm just brushing in a pillow of snow that lay on the hills of the landscape, which I'll revisit later with white to bring them out a little more. I'm going back over with another layer of formation to add some more defining edges in the mountains, and bringing out the clouds with some more brush strokes of white. Now as we let the background settle, let's start working on the formation of the trees. To imitate forest trees from a distance, I'm using the side of my flat brush with a shaded mix of green and blue. Create light tapping motions to suggest treetops. Keep them soft and gestural. Have them aligned sporadically instead of uniform. This allows nature to have its way rather than it appearing man-made and tailored. Alright, so now that we have the mid-range section completed, let's move into the foreground with using a small round, angular, and flat brush as our tools. First, I'm starting with the flat brush and lining where my nearest trees will be placed by painting in the tree trunks. For trees and most solid objects, I like to start with the silhouette first, then work my way up to dimension with layering. So even for the singular leaves, I'm stippling in some organic shapes, which I will revisit with details in the final steps. And for the trees overlapping the darker hues, I'm using a lighter green to bring them out. Here I've jumped to my angular brush to get some more controlled strokes in with random branches and uniform tree leaves growing in a certain direction. Think of this general formation as the framework that will hold all the texture foliage together. Now as we wrap up the main trees for now, let's get into the groundwork, which here I'm using a filbert brush to bring in some natural texture of the ground with stippling in bundles of grass and a mass of yellow flowers. And see, breaking down your piece into segments really help you focus on one step at a time. So even within each layer, you're able to add a little bit more dimension, which brings overall depth to your piece and makes the viewer feel like they're actually in the field breathing in fresh air. Now here is where it gets fun and saves time. I'm using my palette knife to blend in a beautiful green, but that's not the star of the show. This fan brush is the ultimate technique tool for trees. This is where the forest comes alive. You want to load your fan brush with that beautiful base green and lightly tap, flick, or drag it downward to create bushels and branches. You can rotate the brush slightly to vary the textures. For highlight areas, mix more yellow and white into your green. Then tap on the sunlit edges of the foliage. This creates the illusion of needles catching that light. Each tree gets its own unique variation of patterns to make them appear individualistic and natural as nature does. Some may have a hint of red as if fall is approaching, while others may be pine trees and tall standing cypress trees. This versatility brings breadth to the forest and visual appeal to the viewer. And listen, don't hold back on being dramatic either. Get lost in the stippling of the leaves. Imitate what you see without being perfect. Let it flow and become familiar with the technique. Okay, so let's take a step back. With your detail brushes, view your masterpiece as a whole and revisit any areas that need a little bit more loving. Use your small round brush to add more contrasting lines to the mountains and single leaves. You want to pay attention to any areas that need a little bit more depth and value to give a nice visual balance to the overall theme. And even glaze a very thin blue layer over the distant tree line to push them further back and make the closest trees stand out even more. Now this is optional, yet I love to make my pieces pop with gold. So I'm taking this liquid gold leaf and adding some accents where the highlights are. And there she is. Let's marvel at your masterpiece. Drop some trees in the comments if this helped you out. And if you want to learn more, be sure to join my Core Creator Acrylics course below in the description. Let's learn together so we can grow together.